Welcome to the Dentistry on Purpose podcast. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by two very good friends of mine, Hannan and Daniel Saleem. And Hannan and Daniel run the London Dental Centre. If you're familiar with that name, it will be because you will have seen them on the Dental Practice Accelerator, which is a year-long mentoring program with myself, Patel, Sandeep Kumar, and Shaz Memon. And I'm absolutely delighted that they've joined us today for this conversation. So, without further ado, welcome to Daniel and Hannan Saleem. Welcome, guys. How are you doing?
Very good. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you, Justin.
Pleasure. Genuinely my pleasure. So we got a lot to go through today. So let's start by giving you the chance to introduce yourselves to people on the podcast. So Hannan, why don't you go first?
Yeah, so my name's Hannan Saleem. I am the managing director at the London Dental Centre. I, of course, met Justin about 2.5 years ago when I started my career managing the clinic that I took over for my family. And since then, we've kind of grown the clinic.
And we will get into that. We will get into that a lot. Daniel, why don't you introduce yourself as well?
Awesome. So I'm Daniel Saleem. I'm Hannan's brother and older brother, I'll add. So my story is a little bit different, where I went into corporate first before joining dentistry. And that's because I didn't see a career in dentistry at all. I saw my parents working in it from a young age, and it didn't appeal to me. But it was really up until Hannan entered the Practice Accelerator program, and I met yourself, actually, that I saw this whole industry and a career prospect open up in front of me. And we can deep dive into that a bit more. But very glad I did it. So, also a director at London Dental Centre, growing the business with Hannan. Looking forward to the progress.
Yeah, me too. We'll explore a lot of what's happened over the last 12 months or so as we go through today's conversation. But so let's start, Hannan, with how you and I met. I know from us meeting onwards, but tell me a bit about the lead up to that and what happened.
Yeah, I mean, it was quite interesting. So, of course, I guess I saw you online before we met in person. I think where I was with the clinic was I was quite isolated. I didn't really know many people in the dental space. I was running the clinic by myself. I was very new to it at the time. And I guess I was kind of seeking mentorship. And I had this in the back of my head. I need to find someone who kind of knows what they're doing much better than I did at the time. So I think it was actually quite late at night. I was just scrolling YouTube, came across the dentistry.co.uk webinar on YouTube, and it was of yourself. I think at the time it was yourself, Sandeep, and Samir, and it was quite an old webinar, and it was you guys were discussing about how good of an idea it would be to create some sort of program or some sort of mentorship program to then get dentists on board and help them out and grow their business. And I was like, oh, that would be really amazing if that existed. And then I realized, they've already done it in 1 year and applications were opening within that month. And I was like, okay, this seems like a golden opportunity. And I guess that was the first time where I was like, let's spend a lot of time on this application. I'm going to create a winning application. I remember spending about 3-4 weeks just researching all of you guys, listening to all of the podcasts. I was like, let me get to know everyone, what their perfect specialities are. And then I remember even I was on a plane to holiday submitting the application with one of my mates. Yeah,
you've never told me that.
Yeah, one of my mates, James, was so he's very well written. So he was just rewriting the entire application and then helped me through it. Of course, I provided the content. But yeah, and then I guess we had a few calls and then started the accelerator program, and that's kind of how I guess we met first.
Yeah, and how long were you in the practice? How long had you been working in the practice, leading the practice at that point?
I think at that point it had just come to about a year. Okay. So I was really excited at the start because I didn't really know what my obstacles were at the point. So at that point, when I started at least, because you just there isn't anything to I guess be challenged by.
Yeah.
And then when it was coming towards the year mark, I was like, okay, how much progress have I really made? And that's kind of where I was like, okay, I need a bit more direction and kind of reset my goals.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because when you embark on something new, taking over running of a practice, because you don't know what to expect. You don't know the ins and outs. You don't know the daily challenges that you face. And it's a good job you don't, because right at the start, if you knew all the things, here we are, so you're 2.5 years on?
Yeah, 2.5 years now.
2.5 years on, if you looked, if 2.5 years ago you knew all the things you were going to have to encounter over the last 2.5 years, you probably would have frightened the life out of me, right?
But as I was saying earlier, I think that was the problem, at least for me, because the history of the London Dental Centre is it was actually started 15 years ago, 2009, 2010, by my parents, and I would have been 12 years old at the time. And growing up, we saw them dealing with the day-to-day and seeing the struggles and them having to do literally everything themselves and the business being completely dependent on them, taking up all of their time. I think for both of us, definitely for me, I was like, I would rather go into something a bit more easy, a bit more corporate, something where the onus is not on me and the responsibility is not on me. But like, I'm very glad I did it, and now you actually do it and you realise that it's a lot more fulfilling.
Do you think that's because you've had that experience though, of having worked in corporate and you've got, good background? I know you did finance and accounting, and so you understand the numbers now. You've come to it with, I guess, more business and life experience.
Absolutely. So I think that's one of the things I'm quite grateful for. Coming into the business, having worked in those environments, there's a lot of things that I didn't like about the environments, and that's why I left. But there's a lot of things that I learned, and I think I grew as a person fundamentally. And I have found that bringing that experience to the practice has been quite beneficial. Because I think I do things a bit differently than we would normally.
I would say it's a massive advantage. I think
too.
the lens I was seeing things from is, of course, going to be completely different from like a corporate lens that Daniel came in and brought to the practice. I think it's like really incredibly helpful, because I guess that's the sort of the direction that we want to take the clinic in. If we want this to grow, like, we need to start bringing quite a few corporate elements than just like that small family business ran like clinic that did depend on the owners.
Yeah, the structure, the protocols, the systems to give people the clarity so that you can scale without it all kind of starting to fall apart or drift. And I think that's one of the challenges of running a smaller business. You don't always think about those ideas around structure, but I've seen the way that you're introducing that as a series of principles and tools within the practice. We'll dig into that, because there's some really good things you're doing, I think, that people can learn from. Tell us a bit about how the practice, you said it's been around 15 years before you joined. Tell us a bit about the backstory of the practice, because I think a lot of people will relate to that. Those people that are looking at squats, or they started as a squat, or they took over a practice. Tell us the inception of London Dental Centre.
So the clinic was started by both my parents. So Dad was an overseas doctor, Mum was an overseas clinic. They used to own the storefront themselves before. It used to be Dad's corner shop. He used to have a little convenience store there. It was mainly Dad was working, whilst my mum was mainly involved with raising us when we were younger. So once we got a bit older, my mum wanted to get back more into the workforce. So they both decided in about 2010 to open a dental clinic. I think at the start it was really hard for them. We remember when we were younger, we would go out with them, handing out flyers. They would be sitting around for 1 or 2 patients a day.
Really?
Yeah.
So when they started, actually getting patients was the big challenge. Because you're in a really pretty central location, aren't you? It's the same clinic, right? In Old Street.
Yep.
Really, a lot of footfall, busy area, busy part of London.
I mean, it's in a good location, but it is hidden behind a few back streets.
Yeah.
I mean, one thing I do really like about the name is it's really helped us with SEO down the line. I think when we were younger, we thought it was a really cheesy name, calling it London Dental Centre.
Yeah.
But now it's really
genius. It's absolutely genius.
Yeah, it's definitely paid. It's dividends. But...
Yeah. So did your mum and dad have to stop running the shop? So literally close the shop down and convert it to a dental practice?
Yeah.
That's a bold move, isn't it?
Yeah, huge.
I mean, we definitely relied a lot on the community at that time. I know the architectural drawings was done by my uncle's father-in-law. One of the builders was a good family friend. My dad is really good at. There's a good saying in Urdu. It's called being a jugaad, which means you kind of get things done no matter what. And I think that's my dad's spirit is completely that. He's regardless of the budget that we have, regardless of what resources he has, he's going to make it happen.
I spoke to him the other day, and I was telling him I was going to be on this podcast, and I was like, we should actually tell the story about the inception of the practice.
Yeah.
And he said to me, if any normal person was in my financial position back then, they wouldn't have done this. And people actually advised him not to do it. They said, don't take the risk. And then I said to him, I was like, well, if you hadn't taken the risk, where would we be? What would we be doing as a family? And he goes, we would have done something. We would have made it work.
Yeah.
Because he's always been quite entrepreneurial. He obviously had, a tough time when they moved to the UK. He couldn't requalify as a doctor. He had kids. He didn't have time. My mum couldn't requalify as a dentist. And, they didn't speak the language very well. And for them to pull it off and to take that risk, I think, has been huge. And like you said, like, the first few years were really tough. I think we were, pretty much hemorrhaging money for the first 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And it was, the way they describe it, and I remember it being a kid, it was quite tough. It was really tough. But then we can talk about marketing. Because, like you said, footfall isn't everything. Like, it's about building an online presence and working on SEO and getting your name out there. I think that's what we're working on now. And that's where we want to take the practice. And that's what we can do that our parents couldn't have done.
Yeah, and what a lot of people who listen to this podcast perhaps are a bit more established. Perhaps they're used to, dropping letters and kind of physical paper campaigns through to patients, and perhaps haven't really embraced what digital and social really means to building a practice today, because it's a completely different landscape. And I guess your parents must have really tried hard to do some of those physical campaigns locally to establish patients. So they've converted it to a practice. They're kind of trying to do everything they can to generate patients. So your mum's a dentist, is that right?
So she's an overseas dentist.
But she couldn't practice in the UK?
Couldn't practice in the UK. And then what she did was wanted to work at some other clinics nearby, so she became a qualified dental nurse. Okay. And then that would allow her to open a clinic under that GDC registration.
Yeah.
So it's quite funny because she's a qualified dentist.
Yeah.
Working as a nurse, and then we had clinicians come in who were less experienced than her. So it's quite funny, patients seeing the nurse bossing them around and telling them what to do.
Because your mum knew what could be done, she just couldn't practice. Yeah. That's brilliant. That is
There's
brilliant.
So many stories where my mum always tells us, because there will be more junior dentists, and she loved nursing because it meant, of course, she could work herself, but it also meant she could keep an eye on the associates, what they're doing. Where I feel like a lot of principals, they can only really do that if they're shadowing, I guess. But she has a lot of stories where, for example, a dentist might not be doing something in her way, or there's a difficult extraction. She's really had to resist the urge to just take over. She's like, I could do this in a second.
Step aside, leave this one to me.
But I guess she just knows she's not allowed to do that.
No.
It must be really hard as someone so experienced to just refrain from doing what she does best.
Yeah. I guess it's also it's been useful over the years in being able to manage the practice, more closely especially from a patient's perspective, and making sure the patients get the care they want. So your mum was clinically kind of nursing and supporting the associates. What was your dad doing at that time?
Everything else.
Was it? Yeah. Right, everything else. So front of house, managing the practice, stock, coordinating diaries, TCO, as we might call it today, but, following up with patients, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So we'd have a couple staff helping.
Yeah.
Nurses would get involved, or we'd hire some receptionists. But everything from management to payroll to invoicing to ordering, everything that needs to be done. And it was a tough task, and he would do it he did it for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
I mean, we should mention that my sister had a very big involvement from the get-go as well. So she definitely got it the practice off the ground at the start. She created the website, created the logo on Microsoft Paint.
Really?
The original one, yeah.
Used to do all the compliance. I think she was as young as 15, 16. You wouldn't imagine all of the bank documents, loan agreements, compliance documents.
Really?
She would do this at such a young age because of
drafting, editing contracts at age 15.
Yeah.
I've met your sister. She's very bright, isn't she?
She is.
Because your sister's a doctor as well, isn't she?
She is, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
A really talented family then. So tell me, at what point, Hannan, you decided that you would step in and start getting involved in the practice?
Yeah, I mean, we've always been quite involved from a young age. So, even throughout uni, so I think once we got older, our parents have always tried to give us as much responsibility as possible. So even during uni, since I was 18, I was making the hires for front of house, but I always saw that, I would I would interview them, I would be putting out the Indeed applications, we'd run different aspects. Danny would still make edits to the website. My sister would oversee some clinical care, and if there were any complaints. Yeah, we're always loosely involved, and I think we always knew that we'd be loosely involved.
Yeah.
But had kind of left it to our parents to run and manage everything.
Yeah, I'd be waking up on a Saturday morning, just tired after, and probably a night out, to be honest, at uni. And I have to run into the practice and sit at reception and manage diaries and speak to patients.
What? Because something had happened, or because were
No,
you scheduled to do that?
I was scheduled to do it, but I didn't want to.
Yeah. So I think what happened was, so during uni, I had this opportunity to work in like a Series A startup.
Right.
It was in patient healthcare. Really, that was kind of where my passion kind of grew for like healthcare and patient care in general. So I was always really interested about that space. And then my plan was to graduate, get a few years of experience like in anything, and then go on and do an MBA. I was like, okay, I've had this startup experience. Let me work at the clinic for a year or two and then go do my MBA. And so I never had planned to stay in dentistry at all.
So the plan originally was to do a short, like a year or so.
Yeah,
Right,
to do a short stint in the practice,
Yeah.
grow it to like a reasonable scale to like have it somewhat self-sufficient, and then go do an MBA. I reached out to someone online who was a lecturer for an MBA, but also on the side does some coaching for like entrepreneurs. So I booked like one of those free one-to-one strategy calls, and I told him about my plans, and he just shot it all down and just was like, "Don't do it. Don't do an MBA. I've lectured there. It's not right. What's right for you? You have a small business. Look at where you can go with this. Like this is more experience than you'll ever gain from doing an MBA. I mean, I'm not entirely closed my doors to doing an MBA, but it was just like kind of that was the first time where someone had like kind of shifted my perspective entirely, and that's when I was like, okay, well, let's actually have a go at it. And then I started finding the DPA program and meeting other like dental professionals, and that's kind of what opened my view to seeing this could be like a long-term thing.
There's a number of people I've heard say this. Tony Robbins says this. I've heard Vishen Lakhani say, "Let your business be the vehicle for your personal and professional growth." So what you learn about running the business challenges, shapes, and develops you as a person. It's so true, isn't it?
Absolutely.
I don't think we often think about it like that, especially when you hit really big challenges. And we'll talk about some of the challenges you've had along the way. But seeing them for what they are in the moment, which is actually, once I learned to navigate this type of challenge, what you become capable of changes. And, we were together yesterday with your team, and we were talking, weren't we, about identity, self-belief, and who you start to become as a person. Actually, it's those challenges and experiences that shape that thinking and help you to start to lean into the person that resolves those challenges, like your dad's mindset and attitude, right?
Yeah.
If we hadn't done this, whatever we would have done we'd have made a success of it. And I believe you two will be the same. But you won't need to do anything else, because I think you're going to make a success of this. I'm really excited to follow the future, and hopefully people will be as well. So you're in the practice. You've found the DPA kind of program. You're now thinking to yourself, right, I'm going to park the MBA. I'm going to make a go of this. Talk us through the process. What happened and how did it evolve?
I was like kind of scrambling for all sorts of resources at the time. Just anything that would kind of help me kind of like ease the burden off myself. I mean, there was still a lot of things which I relied on my parents for in helping like run the clinic. And I was like, how do I create this such that like I'm looking at all these clinics, these large corporate clinics, they're managing to do without like the owners being involved. Like I was looking at like Sandeep's clinic. Like I know Sandeep's not there making sure like the bin bags are at the clinic, like the stock's all there, like opening and closing the clinic. And I was just thinking, right, this is definitely possible, but it's just how. What it was, I think the DPA program really, really accelerated my growth, because I don't think there would be anything else that was so specific to what I needed and like actually held me accountable to forcing myself to change. The kind of obstacles that I had met at the time were clearly like shown to me that, okay, I need some extra help. There's a need for change, and that's kind of where it started.
It's a kind of 12-month program that we've been on, or series of 12-month kind of interactions and working together. You've had 4 kind of perspectives, really. Shaz from a marketing branding perspective. You've got Sandeep from a systems understanding, how to leverage your teams, and also think about scaling and how you put the right processes in place, and leadership. Then you've got Samir, where you've got brilliant leadership, inspiring your teams, great clinical efficiency, and probably one of the best operators in UK dentistry, I would say, from Sameer's perspective. And then, of course, you and I have worked with Daniel as well very closely on that kind of coaching, accountability, taking the plan and thinking, right, what do we do with that? How do we make sure that that actually works in practice? Because theory is one thing, application's another. So talk us through those kind of iterations of that 12. I know 12 months. Actually, on one hand, 12 months seems like a long time. On the other, it goes by so quickly you almost can't believe it's been 12 months. But talk us through the key steps that you've seen.
One like major thing that I learned was, I think at the time I thought there was like there was a one golden rule of
secret
how
sauce.
a secret sauce
just
on
give
how
me the
to run
secret
it.
sauce.
Like, on how to run the clinic, how to be successful. And I think it gave me the opportunity to meet 4 very successful entrepreneurs, business like leaders who all had completely different perspectives. And at times it was a bit like confusing because like Sameer would say one thing, Sandeep would completely say the opposite. And I was like, okay, we're back at square one. But I guess what it really opened my eyes was that I can do it how I want. And there are some fundamentals that are very important, and I'm incredibly grateful for everyone's like advice. But it just meant that I can craft it the way I want. There's some business fundamentals that I can include, and then push it in the way that I want and that actually feels genuine to me. Yeah, I think like with Sandeep, I remember it being like the times I'd met him, it's always been quite a harsh conversation.
He's straight, isn't he?
He's very straight.
Yeah, I like Sandeep. He gets straight to the point.
Yeah.
But he's kind, but he's direct. I like
he's absolutely fantastic.
Mm.
Just one of the first meetings, I went up to Birmingham to meet him, and he was just like, I had a full agenda of questions I wanted to ask him, like things I needed to be sorted, and he was just like, I'm not listening to any of it. He was
talking to the wrong person.
He was like, give me 3 things and 3 things only that we're going to work on today. I'm going to answer them for you, and then we're going to work on those, and then we'll like go on from there. The first like 2 hours was just him asking me questions about the business and like the core information, which like I wouldn't have even known to give him. So he was just essentially data gathering, being like, okay, this is where we are, and this is how we get there. And he really broke it down into like much more smaller pieces. Yeah, I guess everyone's always coined him as like a fantastic operator, and that's like exactly what he is. He has this like amazing way of like seeing this like, I guess, this bird's eye view of a business and like picking out exactly what's the problem is, where a lot of people are so ingrained in their business that they can never see what the problem is. And I think that was what I was suffering from. Sameer, just going to 11 Dental was just like such a crazy experience because it made me realize what the potential is. Like, you're at the top clinic in the UK. I mean, what I felt as well was all of the dentists who worked at our clinic, they're just as motivated, they're just as like competent, just like as caring about the patient. What really needed to change was like our communication, because a lot of that is what really matters to the patient. If like we could be in any clinic, but if we're not communicating well, then we're not going to get the patient satisfaction like that I guess we need. And I think that was the number one thing I picked up with Sameer, and it was how not only his communication with patients, how he communicated to his team, and that really like opened my mind to just leadership in general and just like, I guess, patient experience.
Yeah. Because we talked about this a number of times, that it doesn't matter how good someone is clinically, if they can't communicate that effectively, the patient doesn't really know how effective the clinical treatment is. Yeah, they'll get a great smile, but they make an assumption they'll get that from anybody. You've got to be able to communicate that effectively so the patient gets the whole experience. It's so important, isn't it? And as you say, Sameer's like a master at it. I've seen him, in practice, and I've seen him in, as a leader. I've seen him in courses, and he's very, very good at that, and he's something he's developed himself.
Yeah, and that's the point at which I talk about Justin.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like, if you don't mind, and then with Justin, what it was 12 months of coaching leadership. And I remember messaging Justin. I was about 2-3 months in, and Justin had given me his book called Coaching Leaders. And I texted him being like, coaching leaders is changing my life.
I remember that text. I was like, I came back to you. I think, wow, that's the best testimony I think I've ever had.
And it was exactly that. And I had a team of 6, which is a much smaller team to what we have now. But I just thought it was incredibly difficult to manage that team. I never thought I would get anywhere with it, and just how I would handle conversations. I guess the difficulty was because I hadn't been like managed in like a formal setting. It was really difficult for me to also manage a team. And I'm also dealing with a lot of clinicians who have years of experience. I mean, dentists are also known for having some level of like
Confidence.
Confidence. Let's go there. Thanks, Justin.
Think about value out there.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, after learning all of those like concepts from your book and our like accountability meetings, it really like supercharged, I guess, my growth, and it really tied everything together.
Yeah.
I've known this guy my entire life.
Literally.
I can attest you did change his life.
I'm delighted to have been part of the journey.
We're arguing, and this guy's question-led, asking me all the
He's coaching you.
I'm like, what's going on?
He's coaching you. I love it.
This isn't you.
I love it. I love it.
No, just this is, we've known you for over a year now. We're quite lucky to have seen you twice in 2 days. Both times.
Yes. Yeah.
Both times in a basement for some reason.
We hang out in all the best places. Right? What can I say?
But we had your Practice Growth Academy session yesterday, and it was genuinely phenomenal. Brilliant. And we have had really, really great feedback from the team.
I'm delighted.
And they've started using it today at the clinic.
Yes.
So we're going to see the results. We're really excited. But it was all about how to think about the psychology of patients and how to communicate effectively and how to manage objections. And I genuinely think that one 9-to-5 course will change the lives of those people and our clinicians. It's going to change their careers entirely. So yeah, thank God we met you a year and a half ago.
Would you know, the other thing that is worth saying is, you know, I work with a lot of different people inside and outside of dentistry, and there are varying degrees of adoption and implementation. And I'd put you and, you know, you, Daniel, and Hannan at top, number one of all of my clients that I've ever worked with in terms of adopting the ideas and translating it into action and actually making it work. And I think from what we've encountered, not just in the last 12 months, but like yesterday's course, you are already talking to your teams about how you're going to implement, how you're going to encourage accountability, and you do it in a way that's encouraging, which is really important. You can't, because nobody likes the stick. You will implement this. But I love how committed you are to improve. You've both got brilliant attitudes towards it. You see challenges as, yes, sometimes, you know, they'll feel like they're sideswiping you or derailing you, but you always come back to, okay, what do we need to do about it? How do we make sure that we get things, you know, in place and on track? So it's a real pleasure to work with people as committed and positive as you both are. So thank you, and thanks for trusting me with your team. It's brilliant. So you're a few months into the program, Hannan. You and I have a conversation, and you announced to me that there's someone new coming on board. And he's your brother, Daniel. Yeah. So tell us a bit about what was going on in the back, because I didn't. What you told me, and then I was like, "Oh, are you sure that's such a good idea?" Having not met Daniel, well, and you remember what my concerns were, don't you? Just like in terms of ensuring that from a robust P&L perspective, that the profitability of the practice won't be significantly, you know, impacted, that kind of thing, because these things are important, you know, to get that financial rigor, and I hadn't realised that Daniel will have that exact financial rigor, so I shouldn't have worried at all. But together, tell us a bit about that piece. How did that happen? Because it wasn't on the cards, I don't think, right at the start, was it?
Definitely.
And then it obviously evolved.
Yeah, I remember Hannan a few years ago saying to me, he was like, "Daniel, look, I'm going to start running the business, and we can take it to somewhere. And you should come on board, quit your cushy corporate job. Everything you've worked hard to build and the career you've strived for, forget about it.
Come and work for nothing in the practice.
Yeah. Let's do business."
How hard did you laugh?
I was like, absolutely not. Because again, I'd seen my family doing it, and I didn't realise there was such a massive industry and all these people who know each other and all the connections. So I did, to an extent, sort of look down on it. And it was, a testament to Hannan and him bringing me in and taking me to these events. We went to Sandeep's My Smile event, and that's where I met you.
That's where we first met in person for the first time. Yeah.
And I was like, this is insane. Like the amount of networking and the relationships you usually attribute and associate with financial industries. Yeah. I was like, it's way better in dentistry. Everyone's way nicer and arguably cooler, and there's a lot more going on, and it's more agile, and you have the opportunity to build something for yourself. And that really opened my eyes. And I was like, okay, cool. You know what, Hannan? I was wrong. I'm in. Let's do it. It did take me a while to transition.
Yeah.
I was doing essentially 2 jobs at once. And I've left my old job, so I can say that now.
Yeah,
But I was
okay,
basically
good.
doing 2 jobs at once.
Yeah, wow. And that's hard going as well, isn't it? A lot of dentists will know that from when they first set up a squat, and they're probably still working as an associate somewhere to build the practice. And so it's quite, I think, quite a common thing in dentistry. Dentists, people in dentistry work very hard. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, there was a lot of strategy behind in convincing Daniel as well.
Yeah,
Like I was putting out all of the like concepts, like question led, like FABSOL, like everything. I was like, Daniel, this is why it will be so great. Like it's gonna be just come on board. But like I guess genuinely, I think around that 7 months mark, I really was confident in like the team that was being built. I was confident in where we were going. Like I was looking back at like how difficult it was before and like where I was now, and I was like, at this point, I'm going to need to either hire like an additional right-hand man, like an operator,
Yeah.
who like as you said would like have an effect on the P&L, or I could bring it internally and like it could be Daniel, and we can take this to a new level in a way which I think like hiring someone wouldn't do. Like if you hire someone
they'll never have
external,
the level of commitment that
yeah.
you have as family members. Yeah.
Working as brothers, working on the family business, it's a completely different importance to me because it's bigger than just myself and my career, and no one else would do the amount of work I do for free. No one would do that.
No.
And
that goes for both of you, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
The late nights, the early starts, the weekends, all of the above, right? It's that discretional effort that you'll only put in if really you've got a vested interest in it. You're a stake in the business. So final mentor was Shaz Memon. Tell us about Shaz. Yeah, tell us about Shaz.
Shaz is really, really great. So with Shaz, he just completely questioned all of my like thought process. He would always come at it with a different angle. I think there was one time when me and Daniel like approached Shaz with this like really rogue marketing idea. And we were like really excited about it. We're like, Shaz, we really want to do this. Like, how do we pull it off? And he just came and just bulldozed it entirely and was just like, nope, bad idea. And this is why. And he's like, and I say this to you because I see you guys as like my little brothers. Like, I don't want you to ruin the brand of the clinic. And what I loved about it was all the advice he'd given us was almost as though it was his own business, his own brand. And like I guess the genuine like character like Shaz has and the generosity he has, it's insane.
And so he's helped you in a few areas, hasn't he?
Yeah.
So that's him steering you to make sure you don't make catastrophic blunders with the brand. What else has he done?
He completely shifted our perspective and the team's perspective on customer experience. We realized it was important. We realized like I guess like with emails, like they have to be professional, they have to be free of grammar and spelling mistakes, of course. But he completely changed that perspective on how we can write emails, how we can relate to patients. Like small changes into our language can really like excel like the perceptions of patients and really give them that confidence. At the end of the day, they are coming to get like treatment done from us. So that's such a personal experience that like they need to feel really confident with us from every touch point. And those were the things that he really helped us with, was perfecting all of our touch points, whether it be physical or even digital. He like even came to the practice and he was like, these are the things that need to be changed. I loved it most because it came from a non-dental perspective.
Yeah.
And he really gave us an insight into what like customers are looking at and picking up on, and how we can shift that feeling from it just being like a NHS dental clinic where it feels very clinical to something which actually feels like a very premium like private brand where patients are comfortable spending their money there and like agreeing to treatment at our clinic.
Yeah, he taught us a lot about the psychology of branding, not just for the practice, but also for ourselves as individuals. And I thought that really changes the game, changes our whole perspective on how we approach the business. Also, he's just so knowledgeable on dental business in general.
Yeah.
And I was like, how does he know so much about the day-to-day? Has this guy worked in a dental... I don't know if Shaz is watching this. Shaz, you worked in a clinic? How do you know this?
He's worked with so many practices, though. Hasn't
Exactly.
he? So what are a couple of like key examples of the changes that you've made as a result of those, like communications, perhaps email, digital touch points? What's been a couple of big things that you've you noticed?
So in terms of like, I guess, digital touch points that Shaz has helped us to change, we had a relook at our branding entirely. I think before we had a very like standard, like we were using like certain colors which become outdated, and he really helped us like create like a timeless design.
Where we were before
Yeah.
was, as we said, our logo was made on Microsoft Paint by my sister, aged 14, 15. And we'd been using that up until maybe a year ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And speaking to Shaz, we were like, okay, brand is everything, image is everything. It's all about the context in which you receive your healthcare. And that has a major impact on customer psychology. I was really adamant that I want to build the brand myself. I didn't want to just hire like a team or even someone on Fiverr or anything like that. I wanted to build it myself and feel like we built every aspect of this business. And I came to him with a number of iterations. And I was like, Shaz, what do you think about this website homepage? What do you think about this logo? And he'd always give me a really solid advice until it was something I landed on that I thought really resonated with me and I thought would resonate with our patients. And he really liked it. And I think we are at a point where it looks quite premium. It tells the story and conveys the messaging we're trying to do. And I'm very happy with it. So
good. So Shaz has helped you through guidance and conversations and just, I guess, tweaking and adjusting to get it to where you wanted it to be and where you think it's really going to resonate with the type of patients you want to attract.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant.
I think it was really interesting what Hannan said about how they all run their businesses differently, you included.
Yeah.
And there's no set golden rule that's going to make your business successful. But I think what they all have in common is conviction.
Yeah.
And they see a vision and they'll make decisions based on whether or not they can get to that North Star. I think that's what we're trying to adopt, and we're getting there, I hope.
And you know, the other thing that's really important is understanding what do you want from your business. And I say that because I think depending on where you are in your life will depend what you want from your business. So when I was earlier in my career, and I didn't start running my own business and being an entrepreneur until I was in my mid-40s, so I was late to the party. I was late to the party because I spent a lot of time investing in my corporate career. You know, there's that saying that says, before you start climbing the ladder, make sure it's up against the right wall. I don't think my ladder was up against the right wall. I didn't realise until I got a fair way up it, and then I'm like, hold on a minute, top of this ladder looks really awful. I'm not sure I want to spend the rest of my career there. So that's why I changed and pivoted. But now that where I am in terms of my life and what I want from my business, what I want from my business is what they call classically a lifestyle business. I want a business that allows me to have the lifestyle I want, the time when I want it. You know, we joked yesterday about my holidays. Right? So my wife and I love to holiday. A big part of my ambitions for my business is that work-life balance. Being able to work with clients I really love, being able to do work I'm passionate about and I know makes an impact and helps my clients. And I want people that understand that I'm not going to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it's not in my interests. And actually, different parts of your life and your career, you want different things and you have different ambitions. And I think that's true for us as mentors as well. You know, we are all doing different things, trying to achieve different objectives. And that's brilliant because, as you quite rightly say, we're all successful. And when I say successful, you know, everyone's definition of success is different. But I think our own definitions, we've kind of all achieved a level of success that meets our own definitions of success, which is great. So actually set the definition right, make sure that what you're trying to achieve is in line with what's most important for you, where you are in your career and your life so far, and then build the plan to go after it. And hopefully that's a really useful lesson for you as well, because sometimes actually knowing that you don't have to fit a mold around what success is. You don't have to meet anyone else's expectations or definitions of success. You just meet your own. It's really important. I wish someone had taught me that in my mid-20s, because I probably wouldn't have chased quite so hard for the corporate career. I probably would have been a bit more satisfied. I'd have been perhaps a little happier along the way as well. Not that I wasn't happy, but on retrospect, you kind of think, yeah, there were times when it was tougher than it probably needed to be, but that's life, isn't it? That's what being a mentor is all about.
Yeah.
Hopefully being able to share some of those lessons back so that you don't have to learn the hard way. I mean, you have to cut your own teeth, as they say, but you don't want to learn you don't want to learn as hard as it has to be, do you? If you can make it easier, then why not do that?
Have you ever told your story on your own podcast?
I don't think, not in detail. No, not in detail. No.
I think that was a good opportunity.
Yeah. So I don't know if people know my background. So yeah, I'll try not to take too long because this is about you, not me. It's interesting because a lot of people ask, how did you get into dentistry? And my answer is always the same. I started in dentistry. So when I left school, I was a dental technician and I trained in a laboratory that was part of a clinical practice. I was there for about 4.5 years, 4 years to qualify, another 6 months when I qualified, realised it's not what I wanted to do. We used to have salespeople come into the lab and the practice to come and sell, their products and stuff. And so once a month we'd have different reps coming in and I'd talk to them and ask them, I was like, how did you get into this? And they'd pull up in their company car and I'd be like, it's a nice car. how did you start? And it's surprising at that point in time, surprising number of salespeople in dentistry, I don't know if it's still the same now, probably is similar, were either ex-practice managers, ex-dental nurses, ex-hygienists or ex-dental technicians. So it kind of, the penny dropped. I'm like, so that is actually something I could do. So then I started looking through, there used to be Dental Press, because this was, show my age, there were no websites, right? The internet, this was not a thing, because this was 1993. I know it's before you were both born. It's before my own children were born. Because it's before my own children were born. I think my daughter's maybe same age as one of you. Anyway, so I then applied for this job as a salesperson, and back then it probably was easier to get into those types of roles. So I had my first interview, and they bit my hand off. Couldn't wait for me to start. So I started on a territory, and they literally, I worked for it was Right Health Group, which is now Right Cottrells. So I had a job with them. They said, you need to come to Dundee. So I booked me a train ticket, went up to Dundee on a Sunday afternoon, stayed overnight, had a week in their office in Dundee training. So they taught me around the factory, around all the different, departments, told me a little bit about marketing, talked me through the products, said we didn't have a catalogue at that stage, but here's all the different products in the portfolio, introduced me to my customer services lady who was very nice, and then said, your territory will be this area. Here are the 11 yellow pages for that area. Buy yourself some record cards, go through all of them, find the dentists and dental laboratories, and just go and visit them. And that was it. And I just assumed that was what I did. So I did. And so I went out. I was with them, started on a territory, literally knocking on doors cold, walking through the door. And did that for about 18 months. And it was okay. And then realised I kind of was interested in doing something else. So I then had an opportunity to go and work for Dentsply. Went to Dentsply. They were much more professional, much more structured, sales training, much more infrastructure around you, better company car, more important. And so then I went to work for Dentsply, and that's when I had my first mobile phone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So this was, I think it was 95 or 96. First mobile phone, started working with Dentsply and kind of was much more professional, felt more confident, started to really thrive. Was there about 4 years. Had a couple of different jobs, different kind of levels of seniority. And then I went to 3M in 99. And that's where my corporate career really kind of took off, because I was with 3M as a key account manager. Then I became a sales manager. Then I left dentistry, went into medical and lots of other different divisions that they run as a sales manager and a business manager. And then I was there for 18 years, ended up as their general sales and marketing manager for their medical solutions division, which is the biggest business, it was the biggest business in the UK for them. And got to 2017 and realised I was at the top of the wrong ladder. Wasn't enjoying it at all. I'd kind of got to a role that I could do. I was good at what I was doing, but I just didn't enjoy it. And I realised all of my time was spent, you'd love it, Daniel, reviewing P&Ls, accounts, numbers, presenting to the board. And I was spending no time coaching my team, seeing customers, having quality conversations, and doing the things that actually were the things that energised me. Everything I was doing kind of drained my energy, whereas now everything I do energises me. So I made a big life decision, which was to quit the corporate world because I knew if I moved from that job to another job, it would be the same thing, different, but a different environment, which wasn't going to kind of fulfill me. So I retrained as an executive coach and then started working with clients one-to-one, and from then just kind of built out my network, different client programs. I've written a couple of books, as you know, started to work with people in dentistry much more, and kind of tried to design a business around the lifestyle that I want. And I feel like every year that goes by, my business get closer to that ideal lifestyle and running a business that I really like with clients I really love to work with. So thank you for asking the question.
No worries.
It's a long answer to that single question.
I'm a long time listener. I haven't heard the story, so I was like, I need to hear it.
Yeah, well, thank you for asking. Hopefully it's useful for people to hear. There's a number of things you will experience, and hopefully through our conversation you've experienced, and that is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But sometimes you know things that you don't even realise are valuable. And that, for me, that's been the one thing that throughout my corporate career, now that I work for myself, I've realised the value in the things I know that I don't even realise I know are valuable. So through mentoring conversations we may have, Hannan and Daniel, where we'll talk about, you've got these challenging situations, or you've got this, and I can immediately, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking, yeah, I've been through that. And I've been through it because I've had 30 years in either sales management, business leadership, coaching roles, and just because I've done a lot of stuff, made a lot of mistakes, corrected those mistakes, I'm able to offer hopefully some useful advice to you on how to handle those more difficult situations. I think it's why mentoring and those relationships that we have with people that are perhaps a couple of steps ahead of us in the journey are so valuable, because it helps you to get up to speed really quickly on the difficulties, doesn't it? So let's talk about the future then, and where you guys are planning to go next, because that's really exciting.
Where I really want to take London Dental Centre is a brand that goes beyond us. I really want to be able to put this clinic in a position where we can, whether we franchise it, whether we sell it on, but something that lives beyond, like, I guess, our careers. Like, I want to see this to go further than just us. Make it become like a known brand in London Dental Centre, a few different chains. In terms of what we want to do outside of dentistry, not entirely sure, but I think we're both quite keen to also like pivot outside of owning and operating dental clinics. But those are things that we're still figuring out.
Yeah. So talk a bit about the London Dental Centre, because some of the things you have both been working on over the last 12 months have been really kind of foundational, haven't they? And with the intention of being able to do a couple of things, I think, from the conversation we've had, which is allow the practices to become autonomous, so almost to run themselves with perhaps just some leadership on your part. Secondly, be in a position where if it was a blueprint, to be able to then either do one of two things, replicate and scale, or support and help other practices to have that same approach and autonomy. So tell us a bit about what you've done, because I've been really impressed with the way you guys have pulled this together.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously it was a running business.
Yeah.
And in some aspects that makes it a bit easier. I found in other aspects it was very challenging to change what's already in motion. It's like trying to change a river, in my opinion. But it was because there's stuff that exists and there's certain ways of doing things and there's staff who have certain ways of doing things coming in. And I know Hannan had these challenges as well. You come in and you try to make changes and people are resistant. People are unfamiliar with the new processes and it's not comfortable. So we had to dismantle before we could rebuild. So it wasn't just building from nothing. And I think that's kind of where we, in the early days, I think you might remember as well, we were I felt like we were stagnating at some points because we were dismantling. But I think you have to go back and build the foundations, like you said. And I think we're getting there. I think we're well on our way to where we want to be. And that was because we built those foundations. Yeah, we had to rebuild the brand. Yeah, we had to hire new people. We had to train them. We had to, buy new equipment, buy iTero scanners.
I mean, and also, unfortunately, let some people go who just didn't want to be a part of the journey. And I think that's like usually quite an awkward topic to talk about. I was really worried about talking about it, really worried about sharing it. And then it was only until like I guess I spoke to like you guys as mentors, and I spoke to other practice owners. And I mean, as much as everyone always says it, they always says hire slowly, fire fast.
Yeah.
Like, I guess when you're in that, like, kind of at like running your own business, you're like, okay, but what about the consequences of letting someone go? It's like, how does that affect the team morale? Does that mean then I have to spend a load of time again on recruitment? But then you realize it actually pays off so much more, just realizing actually this person might not be the fit for us,
Yeah.
and finding someone else. And I think that's been completely our experience. Like, whilst it's sad to like let someone go,
Yeah.
the positive is like when we brought on that next person and they are a right fit, we can see like our performance completely changes and accelerates.
And there's a lesson in here for a lot of practice owners and business owners, who listen in, because that's something that it's one of the most difficult things to do, but it's also one of the most important things to do. And I remember the first time in a leadership role, I remember the first time I experienced having to let someone go because they weren't a right fit. And I was going through a performance management process, and we got to the point where this was, like termination. And it was probably one of the, early sleepless nights I had, because you don't sleep the night before you do that sort of thing. It's really difficult. It's emotional, and it's being able to be sensitive during those conversations, but not get emotional. Again, that's quite difficult, especially when you've worked with someone for a long time and you're making some really difficult decisions. But you've gone through the other side of it, and I'm really impressed with how brave you were going through that process, because it's not easy to do in any stretch, especially when you're so committed to the business, you're so close to it. But you've experienced what I experienced and what a lot of people experience, which is once you've done it, actually what you realise it's like a relief in the business. You get, because if someone's not a fit, then you have a duty as a leader to replace them, remove it and replace. And it's really, really difficult. It's like pulling something out and then having to, it's like extraction, right? It's like an extraction, and then having to replace or fill it with hopefully a better solution. But when you get the right person, and you do that intentionally. I know you've gone through a lot, and we'll talk a bit about that as well, because I think that's valuable for people. It makes such a difference to the culture and the morale of everybody. Mm-hmm. And actually, one of the experiences I had early on, the first couple of times I had to do this in leadership roles, once that person was gone, then other members of the team used to say to me, "Oh, do you know what? I'm so glad that happened because of this, because of that." And it's really interesting that people don't feel they can share that with you while that person's still in the business. Mm-hmm. Once they're gone, the truth seems to evolve and come out all on its own. I don't know if you had the same thing, but
with certain members of the team, you're doing them a disservice by keeping them, because they're not always going to optionally leave, and you're both unhappy in that scenario. Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. It's sometimes the best option to push them out. They can pursue other opportunities. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But I think we're getting to a point now where we have this really good relationship with our team, and it's a sort of synergy where we're all working together really well. And it's something I haven't experienced, and I think it's really, really positive, and it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few things that I guess are really important to mention. Like, especially with small teams, it's so important that you're like on top of that with like whether someone isn't the right fit. Yeah. And I find that just because when we were a smaller team, like when someone wasn't a right fit, it was very easy for them to rock the boat. Especially with a lot of clinics that probably experience that in the UK, when they are smaller clinics, one person can have such a larger effect. Yeah. Thankfully, we're in a very much stronger position with our clinic. But even if we were to have someone who wasn't as strong, it's much harder for them to rock the boat. People do occasionally drift off track, but it means as long as your majority of your team, which we do have, all of our team are so great and they're so fantastic that it keeps everyone together. So it's like, even if someone wants to try and drift off, they can't. It's like they're holding each other accountable. Like, this is the standard. Like, this is what high performance is. This is what company culture is. People kind of expect that to happen. Like, it does to an extent happen naturally, but there's also a lot of intention that has to go behind it. And I had kind of spent a year and a half, 2 years creating company culture, and Danny came in and created it overnight. And I was like, how is he? It was like he'd quit his job, just came into the clinic, and he just started shouting in the clinic. He was like, "Guys, this is what company culture is all about. Company culture." just kept saying the word, like the phrase company culture. And then suddenly I literally just like looked around. I was like, "Oh, it's here now. like we're here. We've got the company culture."
Yeah. But I think if anyone's got a clinic and you want to build a company culture, I mean, number one, you should want to build a company culture
Yes.
because, like we said, if you've got some team members who aren't aligned with your vision, the company culture is sort of what brings them back into the fold. If you've got a clinic and you want to build a company culture, you're the leader. It all stems from you.
Yeah.
And you need to come in with energy, with a positive attitude, no matter what.
Yeah.
And that really needs to be your identity. I think that's what we tried to do. That's why I came in, just being like, all right, guys, we're having fun. This is our company culture. This is where I want it at all times. And you can literally walk in and just shout company culture as much as you want. It works. It works. I'm telling you, it works.
You're creating an anchor with that company culture. When people hear it, they're like, "Oh, yes, that's what we stand for. That's what we're here for. That's what we're here to produce and represent." Yeah. Yes,
and when you say that, and they do something that you don't like, you can go, "That's not company culture. Don't do that."
Yeah, it's good.
I mean, also it creates like, I mean, without just saying it, it's like creating that trust in the teams. It's like, okay, we are a team. We're working together. That is what our culture is. It's much easier. I found it suddenly so much easier to like have those difficult conversations. I think at the start, I always focused on, okay, how do I have this difficult conversation? How do I bring up this particular issue to a team member? You don't actually have to go through all of that like planning and thinking about it in advance if you have that good relationship with the team, and it's part of the culture that, hey, I am going to challenge you.
I completely agree, and we're probably preaching to the choir talking about this together. But there's so much. If you don't decide what you want your culture to be, someone else will decide what it is. One of your team will decide, this is how I want to operate, this is how I'm going to behave, and all of a sudden you find yourself drifting towards a culture you didn't even know was going to be part of the way that your team interacts. And I love the idea of culture, and we talked about this values, culture and values. And this is something I learned from my corporate career. And it's particularly important in leadership, because very often when we have to have difficult conversations with people and we have to correct poor performance or bad behaviour, it's always linked to people's interpretation of what is and isn't acceptable. Very, very often, you know, if I think about my leadership career, the amount of difficult conversations, performance-related conversations, they were always about people's behaviours. And those behaviours were linked to their interpretation of what's acceptable and what's not. And the great thing about company culture and being clear on it and being intentional about it, and company values, and arguably the two influence each other really strongly. When you have values or a culture that you've defined, and part of that culture is how you interact with each other, the commitment you make to the business, the way that you want to show up every day, the commitment you make to customers or patients. But once that's identified, you've all agreed it and it's documented, as you start to have performance-related conversations, it's not subjective. It's not my opinion. It is holding people accountable to a standard we've agreed. And all of a sudden, it depersonalizes the difficult conversation. And that for me is one of the real benefits of company culture and values, is that it becomes a really clear set of standards that we can help people to be accountable to, including ourselves as leaders, right? Sometimes it's good to remind yourself, actually, the company culture is it. We talked about this yesterday, you know, even on those days when you feel a bit flat or deflated, recognizing this is the type of person I am, this is the business culture we're driving, and I need to show up to represent that. It's like helps you reset yourself, doesn't it? The fact that you guys are doing this so early in your careers and with you know the first practice that you run is brilliant, because you'll be able to adopt that and really, you know, scale it in a way that's going to be meaningful for, hopefully, for you, the practices and the businesses that you run in future.
It's been so instrumental, because I think I thought when, like, I guess I started, we had a team of 6, and I thought just managing them would be like, it was really, I found it really difficult.
Yeah.
And now we have a team of 14, and like management's a breeze. Like really, like as the team,
isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it's like as the team should grow, it should be like a linear relationship. It's like as the team grows, the stress should increase. But actually, it's been a completely inverse relationship, where like the team's growing, my stress is decreasing, and it's really nice to see.
And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're clearer with what you want from people. you've defined a really clear culture, and you're recruiting people that fit with that clarity and the culture. So do you think that's the secret ingredient? Is that, there is no secret sauce, but part of the secret sauce, one of the ingredients in the secret sauce might be that you have created it.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
It's not, because it's not an accident.
It's not. No, it's a lot of intentional actions. I think what I was fighting with a lot was with experience, and like I guess it was like I could read all of these books, I could learn all of these concepts, but sometimes like I would have had to make the bad hire for me to like kind of then learn. Okay, that's something I need to watch out for next time. That's a small process that I might have missed out. That next time is not going to happen. Like in regards to onboarding process, and it's exactly what you said. It's like. People are, I mean, one thing you also said to me very early on was like, they're going to really test your boundaries. Everyone will test your boundaries. But if at the start you just set that expectation, it just doesn't occur from like the get-go. And it's like so important to do that from the start when you have like bring someone on.
So we talked a bit about the future. The future related to dentistry then. What are the next, what's the next, let's bring it down to the next 12 months. What are your priorities for the next 12 months in terms
priorities for the next 12 months? So we want to grow the current business to what we believe is its maximum potential.
Yeah.
And there's some things we can do to change even the definition of that potential. So whether that's a renovation and changing the number of clinics within the premises, that could be step one. That's something we're exploring. Operational efficiency, training up our team to really get as much value out of their clinical skills and out of our patient base as we can. That's part of why we did the course yesterday.
Yeah.
So that's forefront.
Yeah.
I'm not opposed to starting another clinic at some point. I think that's definitely something we'd be interested in. But then also outside of dentistry, there's a ton of things that we're interested in. That's partly why I was so keen to come on board and leave the corporate world, is because I want to be able to pursue other avenues and do something a bit more creative, whether that's, more like dental specific business consulting, or just building a brand, or even starting a podcast, or just general creative pursuits, and being a bit more entrepreneurial and thinking a bit more on our feet. So that's the next step. So over 12 months, I guess the goal is to figure that all out.
Yeah. And perhaps put some of the foundations in for those different creative ideas and channels that you perhaps want to explore further. And I think, because you're both very young, ambitious, bright, entrepreneurial, so it gives you that, I guess, lots of options and opportunities to be able to do it whilst also having, your eye on the main business, which is the London Dental Centre, and hopefully getting that to, as you say, maximum potential.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'd say long-term goal is like you said, it's to be, for me personally, it's about orchestrating my life and the businesses so that I can do things that really bring value to my life. And that doesn't mean working all the time. It means having things in place that allow me to do the things that I love, whether that's, going on holidays or skiing or being with friends and family.
Yeah.
The main ambition has always been to retire our parents. And, we're getting to the point where like our mum comes in like once every couple of weeks. My dad has, still loves to be involved with the business, but he's quite light touch on some of the things, and he's, loves to be involved in things like the finances and invoicing. So we manage that together now. But ultimately, we want them to be able to spend time with their grandkids. So my sister had a kid a year ago, and they absolutely love that. So nice. It brings us joy to be able to see them, living a life where they get to really be grandparents and just relax and not have to stress too much.
And I guess just give them back everything they've kind of given to us. Yeah, and basically it's what Daniel said, is that I really want to feel, I never want to feel like I'm working, right? Like I want to really do something that I really enjoy, and that like really gives me some like deep sense of, I don't know what word it is, satisfaction.
Yeah.
And I guess it's just like working because I want to, as opposed to because I have to. And I guess that's almost what most people are looking for. But
finding it is not always straightforward. But the other thing that's interesting is that a lot of people don't get to that realization until much later in life. I probably didn't get to that realization until I realized I was at the top of the wrong ladder, and then thought, right, what do I do now? And even when I first started my business, I'm not sure I was quite there. It's only probably the last 5 or 6 years, from my mid to late 40s that I've recognised the importance of fulfillment, enjoyment of what you do, following your passion. And it's interesting because I think the more you do that, the more naturally connected you are to what you are doing. So because you enjoy it, you have this, we talked about energy levels yesterday, you transmit a different energy, you attract different types of people, opportunities, and I guess situations, and that almost becomes self-fulfilling. So I think to be asking those questions right now, to have those as goals are really, really insightful, actually. And hopefully there'll be people listening to this perhaps thinking, I haven't thought about that for myself, because I don't think a lot of people do. You get wrapped up in your career, working, maybe family life, depending on where people are. And actually that opportunity to stop and take stock, I think actually what am I trying to achieve is really, really important on a personal level.
That being said, though, nothing wrong with working in corporate, to be honest. I really loved it. I did.
Yeah.
And, some people work in corporate their whole life. And the good thing is, or not even corporate, but just like working in any business.
Yeah.
5 p.m. hits, 5:30 p.m. hits, and you can switch off. And your weekend is yours, and you don't think about work outside of work in most cases. Some people obviously do. But there's nothing wrong with it. I think some people have happy, fulfilling lives.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to do it anymore. I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. What else is important for you guys that we should talk about today as part of this discussion, that you think through the lens, I often think through the lens of our listeners. So there's people that are, principals of practices, maybe associates that want to set up practice, or perhaps there are, other professionals in dentistry who are, ambitious and thinking about, how they build either career for themselves or perhaps growing their practice. What else do you think is important?
So I went to Sandeep's My Invisalign Business course.
Yeah.
And really, really great course in itself. There's one thing that stood out to me, which was this concept of there's one-way doors and then there's two-way doors. Those two-way doors, they're small, quick decisions. Do I do this thing differently? Do I adopt a new type of software to manage leads? Those kind of things, you should just make those decisions, see if it works. If it doesn't work, come back from it. It doesn't change very much.
Yeah.
They could have a real iterative value for your business, and you're doing yourself a disservice by not trying. There are obviously things that are one-way doors, like do you hire an associate? Do you fire an associate? Do you make these massive decisions like do you change your patient management software from one thing to another? Because that's a massive change. Those things require a lot more scrutiny. Thinking about these smaller decisions as two-way doors allowed us to iterate really quickly and be like, okay, well, this isn't working, let's change it. If it doesn't work, doesn't matter. And that trial and error that we've been able to do, I think has allowed us to progress a lot quicker than we would have if we'd scrutinized over every small decision.
So recognizing the difference between those decisions, that actually this is a simple decision, let's just make it, rather than, as you say, painstaking review and indecision. It can be paralysing for people, can't it?
Exactly.
I really love that analogy, and I've heard Sandeep use it as well. I'm glad you brought it back to.
Well, it's
to
absolutely
the
that.
attention.
I think
It's good.
now there was a lot of things on our to-do list, and then it's like me and Daniel will be questioning why hasn't it been done, and we're just like, I'm not sure whether to do it, and immediately I either hit Danny with it or Danny hits me with it. He goes one-way door or two-way door. And it's like, just like head down it's two-way door.
Two-way door.
Like, okay, we're going to
Just
do
do
it.
it.
Like, just do it. And
Yeah,
a lot of those have been the right decision, and we're glad we made them.
Yeah. But you could have reversed out of them. If
Exactly.
They weren't.
Yeah, there were
Quite
some
easily.
that we started using a different lead management software. Tried it for a couple of weeks, didn't really work. People didn't resonate with it. Got rid of it. Doesn't matter.
So that's one-way and two-way doors. I'd love to talk about networking because. Some of the events that I see you guys at, like the MySmile conference, and but like events, and some of the events you go to, like the Care Stack events, like lots of those. I guess they're kind of invitation only events. A lot of them actually. You have to be in a network, but you have to have put yourself in the position and reached out to people to get those invitations, right? Even like trade shows and events. If you think about the number of people that are actually at those events compared to the number of dental professionals there are in the UK. It's a really, really small slice. You think about the number of people that actually put themselves out there and do that networking, put themselves through the networking. What would you call it? Like I was going to say the pain of networking. That's not really a good representation of what it is. But it does take confidence and courage to do it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's not like the first thing you think of. First thing you think of is sitting in your clinic room, seeing patients, just doing the do, working however much you work, and then when you finish, like relax, But you both have done a really good job of networking. So talk us through a bit about your experiences of doing that over the last couple of 12 months, maybe a bit longer.
Absolutely. I mean, it's so important. I think
Yeah.
some of the people I've met in any of these events, any of these exhibitions, conferences, have really been incredibly helpful in like our success. Some of them are now really good like mentors to us. Some of them are really great friends, and we've just managed to learn so much from them. To anyone listening at home, I guess what it is really get out there, and you might feel like, okay, this course is like 100, 200 pounds. It's not worth it. Am I going to get that much value? Sometimes value isn't just in the course. It isn't just in the event. It's a lot of the time in the people that you meet. And I definitely found that we've like just by sharing stories with other practice owners or like similar situations that we've been in, it really gives you a different perspective on like how to handle things. And you also start to realize, well, actually, it's not just me in this problem. There's a lot of other people who have faced similar situations, who have like valuable advice to offer. And I think until you don't get out there and network that, you won't really feel this confidence that there is a support network out there to help you and give you advice.
Yeah.
I think with networking as well, you can meet one person and it will change your life. And you don't know until you try.
Yeah.
And the benefit of the dental industry is it's so small and everyone knows each other that if you've got a problem, who's the best person to ask is the other people in the industry, right? Because everyone does everything differently, and people have different solutions. And if you speak to someone, they don't have the exact solution you're looking for. They'll know someone who does. I don't know in terms of how much time and money you've saved, but you've solved that problem, and you've done it essentially for free.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely get out there, and people need to go and do that.
The fact that we're sitting in this room together is testament to networking, because the only reason the DPA ever existed was because I met Sandeep and separately met Samir and separately met Shaz through networking. And then in the early stages, realised this opportunity to talk to Sandeep and Samir, approached FMC and said, look, I've got this idea for a webinar. Would you back it? The three of us hosted this Business of Dentistry webinar, which was the one that you saw, right? And off the back of doing that webinar, we had such a positive response from people. And FMC had queries about, do these guys do something together? That DPA was actually formed. And then off the back of that, and all of our connection with Shaz was brought in for this last 12-month period. You found us off the back of that and applied. So actually, the only reason we're even here is arguably because of networking. It does take an investment of time, but it is that word investment that I like so much. It's an investment. It's not a cost, because those relationships will always be beneficial for you. And really, you think about our experiences in work and life. Actually, the things that are most meaningful are the people that we meet. Can't do it without making an effort and building your network.
Also, not just for business. It's also sort of like from a social lens. You're talking. So I've got friends outside of dentistry, and I talk to them about what we do day to day, and I complain about our day-to-day problems. And they're like, I don't care. I can't relate to this at all. But then we've got friends in dentistry, yourself, so many friends that we've made from going to these different events. And they're the ones who are the perfect soundboard, and they're the ones who you can really talk to about certain problems that other people just don't understand.
Because they get it, because they're facing them themselves, or they've faced them, and hopefully they've got some advice that they can share that's useful, and vice versa.
Exactly.
Because it happens, doesn't it?
What I've learned over the last 12 months as well is businesses and brands are less so about spending money on marketing and advertising and doing these weird campaigns. A lot of it is now creator and founder led.
Yes.
And I think most people are going to agree with this. You'll start resonating with the people who either own, operate, or run certain businesses. And that's where we're headed. And I think we've seen that in dentistry. There's really, really good examples. Shaz is a perfect example. Clear Smiles, Chetan, and Ajay are really good examples. It's about the people who operate those businesses, and it brings authority and it brings a familiarity with your business.
Thanks for listening to this Dentistry on Purpose podcast episode. I hope you've enjoyed exploring what it's like to really start to work with mentors and actually start to expand and grow not only your thinking and performance, but your capability and the practice over the last 12 months. Lots of different key takeaways, and I'm sure you've got your own. The key things for me, I think, really are the power of the network and how rare that is in dentistry, really leaning into the people and the quality of those relationships. The other thing is about, finding people who are further along on the journey than you, who can help and who are prepared to, share their time with you, and for whom actually those relationships become really mutually beneficial. Because for a lot of us running businesses, and I'm sure you've experienced this yourself, actually it can be a lonely place. And finding a network, building a network, being intentional about that actually helps you to feel more connected day to day in your practice, but also hopefully helps you with some ideas that inspire you to really continue to grow and thrive yourself in practice. So if you'd like to contact Hannan or Daniel, you can find them on either LinkedIn or Instagram. They're Hannan and Daniel Saleem, and they'd welcome the opportunity to have a conversation with you or connect with you. They're really, as you can tell, really genuine, open guys and really looking forward to building their future network in dentistry. So until the next episode, see you then.